I'm very aware that it's kind of difficult for that newer generation to get into some older NES games, and there might even be some people out there saying that there's no such thing as a 10 out of 10 NES RPG, but I grew up on the system, and I could not disagree more. I still to this day count the NES among my favorite systems, and some of these games are masterpieces in their own times, and others I just look back as fondly remembered gems, but they have all stood the test of time, and so now let's start going through them in release order. First up, Final Fantasy, released in December of 1987. I got the very first Final Fantasy game whenever I was in 3rd grade, and I absolutely fell in love with it. I would take the Nintendo Power Strategy Guide to school with me, and I would read it in class during some downtime or even outside during recess. I just had Final Fantasy on the brain, and the second that I got home, I would pop in that game and then play it till it was time for bed. I was absolutely addicted to this. The graphics were like nothing that I'd ever seen before, and the music was enchanting. But I think what I liked the most was the ability to change up my party with each different playthrough, ensuring that I had a new experience every single time. I went through with balanced parties, magic heavy parties, physical only parties, and I just can't even count how many times I've beaten this thing. I love it. Number 2, Dragon Warrior 3, released in February of 1988. While I liked Dragon Warrior 1 and 2, and they really did introduce me to the genre, Dragon Warrior 3 cemented my love for it. My mother got it for me whenever I was in 4th grade, whenever I broke my arm, and I was laid in bed for a week straight just playing this thing. Just as I loved choosing the different classes in Final Fantasy, that same aspect is here, except it's even more robust, with more classes and the ability to class change into whatever you want multiple times throughout your adventure. This is an open world quest right from the start where you explore a world based upon the real world while searching for the 6 orbs of legend. And once you find them though, the shit kinda hits the fan, as who you thought was the big baddie isn't actually it, and you're actually sent back into the world of the first game, Alefgard, to put a stop to the Demon Lord's machinations once and for all. Number 3, The Guardian Legend, released in February of 1988. I love this game, and while it might not look like an RPG at first glance, it still definitely is one. If you're unfamiliar with this, basically it's almost like 2 games in one. You alternate between space shooter stages where you're flying from one planet to another one, and whenever you land, you get to explore the planet that you're on foot. It's kind of like Blast or Master, in that you explore in your tank with a side view perspective, then you get out and you fight alone in an overhead view. However, whenever you're out of the ship and exploring the planets, you'll be collecting currency, buying weapons and items, gaining experience and levels, finding treasures and weapons, beating up bosses, and exploring. All of those things that you would be doing in a normal RPG. This is definitely an example of one of the games that I look back with a fondness. Number 4, Destiny of an Emperor, released in May of 1989. Here's a game that I actually got into pretty late in life, only a few years ago in fact, but boy, is this one a gem. Many times as a kid, I shied away from games taking place in ancient China for whatever reason, maybe because I thought that they might be too complex or weird for me, but the older that I've gotten, the more that I've looked back into some of these games that I've missed. Taking place in ancient China, the game looks and plays just like any other Dragon Quest game, except for those battles. You can recruit up to 5 different generals, and instead of damaging their HP whenever you attack, you instead kill their soldiers, and also, instead of magic, you now have tactics that you can use, which do the same sort of thing that spells would do. And, as a quality of life improvement, there is an all-out command that pretty much just works as an auto battle. It's pretty cool, and if you're at all interested in the time period, please do check it out. Number 5, Glory of Hercules 2, released in December of 1989. And now, here we've come to the first of 3 different games that were never released in America, but I later played through with the help of the translation scene. It's always funny to me how Nintendo always whines that RPGs never took off in America, but you know what? Maybe if they actually released some of the good ones here, then people might have actually played them. Enough of my soapboxing though. This is the second entry in the long-running Japan-only series, and it's pretty much like a Dragon Warrior 2 knockoff, but set in ancient Greece. There is a surprising amount of dialogue and character development though for an NES game, and the graphics are really nice. There's also a lot of exploration and secrets to be found as well. It's just a shame that most people here in America have never heard of the series, and if they have heard of it, it's because of that crap-ass DS game released a few years back. Number 6. Dragon Warrior 4, released in February of 1990. By the time that I actually got Dragon Warrior 4, I'd already gotten an SNES and Final Fantasy II, so it took a lot to drag me away from Cecil's adventure. But if there was a game to do it, it's this one. Unlike every single other Dragon Warrior game, this one's divided up into 5 separate chapters, and in the first 4, you play as your different party members, going on their own special adventures and journeys of self-discovery. But then, in the 5th chapter, the whole world opens up to you, and you play as the hero as you go around and gathering up your party members, discovering the mystery behind all the kidnapped children, and climb your way up to a castle in the skies. This game kicks off the Zenithan trilogy and really pushes that NES to its limits. Number 7. Crystalis, released in April of 1990. Whenever I was a kid, I would constantly scour the pages of Nintendo Power looking for anything that I might like. Then I would add it to that list of games that I want to try out or buy. I kept reading article after article in the magazine about Crystalis, and every time I saw it, I wanted it more. And I kept on seeing it all the time, mostly because the game is infamous for its difficult "what do I do next" moments. As an action RPG before I really knew what that was, all I knew was that I had to play it. And whenever I finally got my hands on it, after my mother pretty much stole it from the rental store, I was enthralled. I would sit there playing it with like 10 different Nintendo Powers open in front of me, as well as a notebook that I would use to record information, clues, hints, and tips. Because while I knew that it was notoriously difficult, I also knew that I was not going to let this game get the best of me. And it didn't. I am proud to say that I was able to beat this well before the internet ever came into my household. Number 8. Chronicle of the Radiant War, released in November of 1991. This is an absolutely beautiful Japan-only action RPG that's pretty ahead of its time. Think something like Secret of Mana before on the SNES. Only here, though, you have control of 5 separate heroes instead of the 3. The world is a joy to explore, vivacious and full of life, and the battles are really where it shines. You'll be out exploring the overworld kind of like Zelda, only for random encounters to ensue, where you then have to use your party members to slaughter them indiscriminately. All of y'all can use different attacks, like swords, magic, and boomerangs, and the story's pretty decent too. You crash land into a fantasy land, but upon arrival, again, you get amnesia. And then as you're trying to find your way back to home, you meet a damsel in distress and decide to help her out and save the world. And while I didn't play this one as a kid because, it wasn't released here, I can definitely see that this would have been a hit back in the day. Number 9. Gargoyle's Quest II, released in July of 1992. I cannot say enough good things about this platformer meets traditional RPG hybrid. I have expressed my love for it over and over again throughout the years, but here I am again, singing its praises. If you've ever played Ghosts and Goblins, then you know who Firebrand is. He's that titular gargoyle. But here, he stars in his own subversive RPG as he travels throughout the underworld, to towns and dungeons alike, to help restore balance to the ghoul realm. While you will explore traditional overworld here as well as towns, whenever you go into the dungeons, the action's going to switch over to a non-linear side-scrolling stage setup, and here you're going to be finding key items, weapons, and new magical spells in order to get different attacks or reach new areas. I had a blast with this one as a kid, even though I was still notoriously terrible at it. And finally, number 10, Just Breed, released in December of 1992. Here is our final game, and yet another one that was never released here in America. It's a strategy RPG by Enix, but what really sets it apart from other strategy RPGs released at the same time, like, Fire Emblem, is that you don't just control single characters. You control entire squads of 6 characters each, for a total of 36 different characters on the battlefield at one time. And you also get to explore towns and talk to characters in between battles too. You can buy full equipment sets for all of your characters rather than just weapons, and oddly enough, the main character looks mysteriously like the hero in Dragon Warrior 4. I first played through this whenever it was translated, but I loved it so much that whenever I was Let's Playing on the channel, I did a full playthrough of it, because more people just deserve to know about this gem. So that's it for the top 10 best 10 out of 10 NES RPGs. Did I miss any? Let me know what your favorites are. Let's get a discussion going on here, and let's all talk and chat about it, because I'm always here in the comments too. And if you like what I do here on the channel, please head on over to the Patreon to sign up for early access to my videos, as well as behind the scenes photographs. The link to it is over in the video description. And as always, please like, comment, and subscribe, and have a good day.